Hi, welcome to my new channel. This new series, I'll be breaking down primarily how I'm seeing the crypto market, but there's a good chance that I'm going to cover other markets as well. There's forex, there's commodities, there's equities, and markets tend to interweave at different times and places, so you can always glean some good information, good context by looking outside just the narrow sector that you're primarily focused in. For today, May 29th, we are nearing the end, the daily session close, which is an ideal time to be doing analysis, really, since we have a good idea of what today's candles will ultimately end up looking as. Uh, like, whichever. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started. We'll start by looking at Bitcoin. We can see if we quickly zoom to the weekly frame, the high time frame, we can see Bitcoin is, right near its all-time highs. As a matter of fact, last week was when it, flashed a new high. But so far, it hasn't really been very quick to follow through. So just going back to the daily, we can see that right now we're seeing some weakness. Um, Still hovering right around the previous all-time high, but definitely doesn't look like it's going to hold much longer. Just on a first, impression basis kind of look, you can see somewhat of a head and shoulders pattern developing over here as of late, with a possible resolution sometime around early to mid June, looks like. Um, that it is perhaps a little too early to tell, but it definitely does look like weakness to me. If we see a little more clues, we can see that on the daily, the most recent ascending um, trend line has been broken. It was actually broken on daily yesterday, and it's continuing downward today, which gives a little more credence, I think, to the weakness angle. And if we try to add another look here, give it an ascending wedge, which can typically be a bearish pattern, actually, especially when you see a fake out like this to the top side. You see some follow through as it breaks down, um, and we'll see where it ends. Usually when you want to see like the measured objective for a move like this, you measure the height of the pattern at the width, or one of the widest points, but I find that a shortcut for doing that is just to turn it into a channel. And if we do that, we can see that sometime around early June, that target date area that we were looking at is also around the time that the support line for this channel hits that measured objective and finalizes that head and shoulders pattern. So yeah, I mean we'll keep an eye out for that. I don't want to get too far ahead and try to determine whether it's going to break down from there, um, or reverse. We'll just have to see the price action once we get there. But that's for the short term. Yeah, I guess for the next week or so, I would expect a little more weakness from Bitcoin, but we'll keep an eye on that. Moving on to Ethereum, um, we can see that most recently on the daily, it's been struggling to clear these highs. It did flash above that briefly today, kind of swept the high, but it's resolving to a pretty bearish looking inverted hammer here. So something I would stay away from if I'm trying to, go long, if I'm trying to buy spot. I think that with Bitcoin's current weakness, we could see Ethereum compound that, or Ethereum itself will compound itself, I guess. We've seen Ethereum definitely lag behind Bitcoin for the better part of the past year. Um, so if Bitcoin is going to drag the market lower, um, that would that could spell trouble for Ethereum if it continues to show relative weakness compared to Bitcoin and the market as a whole. Um, we want to, just from this, aside from this ugly looking candle, just if we want to give it a bit more context, I think we can um, drop a channel here. We don't have two ticks at the top, so this is a bit dubious, I admit, but um, it also looks pretty clean if you see the way price is played with it. You see that's the 75th percentile of the channel is where pretty much the price ticked today before it got rejected and resolved. We've seen some of these candle, um, tails, shadows, whatever you want to call them, get near the 50% mark of this channel. So there's something, or potentially something here. We'll keep an eye out for that. As far as where Ethereum could head if we continue to see weakness from the market, there's not, I mean, to be honest, there isn't a lot of support before the past, most recent consolidation, kind of like long-ish term consolidation where it spent a couple weeks here at the 1800 level, um, which would be quite a significant drop, right? I think we're looking probably 60, no, wait, not 35. What am I thinking? 35%. Still not good, not ideal. I think we would rather avoid that if possible, so we are not going to be bidding here. Possible that it doesn't go that low though. Since it's coming from the top side, there was some, you can see this level here around 2000 has shown to be, a place where price will wobble around and play with. Since it's coming from the top side, we're going to, treat it as support for the time being. If it gets there really quickly and does not seem to be tapering off, um, well, we re-examine, and perhaps this channel isn't really destined to hold. But for the time being, I think there's the risk definitely outweighs reward for the time being, and that's what I'm seeing for Ethereum. I'm gonna move on to XRP. Got a little bit ahead of myself with XRP. See this trend line. So this is an interesting chart because we saw so much strength from it back in November into the early parts of this year, and it has held it to its credit. XRP kind of became a joke for a while, but it's sitting up, more than 4x from where it was, you know, 6 months ago. That's no joke. That being said, while it's mostly been range bound, we can kind of, if we want, we can draw a range between 2.9, 1.9, basically, where we've had some deviations above and below, or we can extend it either way. However way you look at it right now, we are kind of right in the middle of it, and with it being in the middle, a pretty ambiguous spot, but breaking down from this trend line, I would say that we're probably biased to the downside here as well. As far as to where it could land, support, I want to keep an eye on where these tails hit before at the 1.9 level. If it breaks down from that, we're going to want to look here at 1.6 to 1.5 for further support. If it goes weaker than that, I think we're looking at bigger downturn for the market as a whole. Could probably call it crypto winter by that point. But again, it's been hanging in this area for a while. So I think we'll continue to see it hang around this area for at least the near term, and see where it goes from there. If we look at it on the weekly view, you can see more of the recent strength becomes more obvious here. Is it's still pretty close to the, near the all-time highs, relatively speaking, um, which is interesting given where most of the alt market is, at least compared to Bitcoin. On the Bitcoin pairs valued near the lows. It looks like XRP, uh, probably the number one shitcoin, is hanging strong. So that is definitely interesting. If we try to look at some high time frame patterns here, let's get a bit of a potentially ascending triangle, but with the 80%, 80, 90% level not hitting around 2029. Yeah, I don't know. It's clearly too soon to try to trade this. Um, but it's not something to discount. This market is still pretty nascent, um, still developing, and I don't know about y'all. I'm only using, you know, very few. I would say maybe 4 or 5 different crypto projects or Web3 projects uh, in my current, personal business cases. It's not like every single crypto project right now is going to hang around forever. So, all this to say, we're going to be watching definitely through 2029, because things are going to change. There's going to be new products coming out from these companies, there's going to be new challengers, and it's going to be an exciting time. At least it won't be boring, you can say that. For the time being, I can be entertained by talking about where might do a speculation on these prices, these charts. We'll see where XRP goes in the near term. Definitely don't think that we're gonna see a huge decline. Not Probably not below this July 23 spike, right around $1, a little bit below $1. I would not be completely shocked if we saw XRP, go down to $1 from 330 or wherever it was. It would be a pretty big drop, right? That probably is around 60%, 72%. But it seemed bigger, right? So it's, can't discount that. Trade carefully. I want to move on to XMR, Monero, which in the past couple months or so has seen a pretty nice move. Actually caught it here from around 217 and got out around 400 for a pretty nice move, personally speaking. What's interesting about Monero, um, which is like later near the end of last year, we saw XRP surge up towards its high time frame range highs. We saw a pretty similar move from XLM. Um, these are some pretty old coins. Pre 20, I want to say, I mean, we can look right here, right? This is 2014 coin. XLM is, XRP is from 2013. So these are, relics. These are ancient coins. XLM has also been around a while, almost as long, I want to say, 2014. So I just do find it interesting that while a lot of the alt market, there's definitely some new projects that have been, running laps, some smaller caps, but these are larger cap coins that have been proven. They've hung around several cycles and they're back near range highs, which is very interesting. It's if we look at when they hit these highs, it's back in 2017. So we're looking at about what 8 years now, maybe 8 years of consolidation after a giant move. We tend to think of Bitcoin cycles at least in 4 years, um, but maybe they're extending, and maybe the market in general is capitalizing further, and thus it's going to take maybe twice as long to move the same way that they moved 8 years ago. Keep an eye on that. That's kind of tangential to the actual analysis of Monero, which if we look here at the daily time frame, saw a move surge as recently as, let's say this looks like it was last week, a bit over a week ago, and has pretty much given back all of those gains. It's currently sitting where it consolidated for about a week before it moved up. It did sweep the lows yesterday, has held them so far today, but I would not be surprised if we saw some further um, weakness from Monero. I actually think that after a big move like this, it's going to take probably a few months to just kind of consolidate and fill in some of this empty space. Um, so as far as like for a bid, I'm not exactly looking at it now. I do think that it'll hold up pretty all right. If we do see, a dip down here, it'll probably get bought up pretty quickly, and it'll just be going sideways. And I'm going to be looking at it pretty closely. I really like this project. I think it's, you know, due for a big move. There's some exciting things coming down the pipe for the protocol in general, um, but nothing's a given. So if we see Monero, you know, especially buyers, eat up some of this and keep the price trending generally higher, I think there's a very good chance that later on, once the market gets into the frothy stage, we'll see Monero do some pretty explosive movements. In the near term, if Bitcoin continues to show weakness, I don't think Monero is necessarily going to be immune from that. It's already showing it a bit ahead of Bitcoin. This is not a bullish candle, especially on the weekly time frame. So if it falls further, I would actually be looking number one around 280, because 280, 290, this has been historically pretty big region for Monero. If you can extend it back over here to 2018, you got a candle high there and some wobble around it over here in the 2021 top. Um, so that will play first support in my opinion. If it falls below that, you're looking here at 240-ish, which would be pretty bearish in my opinion. Then you're looking at pretty much a larger version of what we're currently seeing, right? If we see this move get eaten up the way the current week or last week is getting eaten up currently, then momentum's going to be on the side of, you know, downward momentum, bearishness. And so we'll probably just see a continuation. It'll be like a fractal. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Um, and I don't want to see that. I really like this project. I think it should stick around for various reasons. Um, and if it doesn't, you know, and privacy is really dead, I think that's going to be a dark day for all of us. Um, but in the near term, probably would not buy this. I want to see it test 280, 290, 300, and go sideways a bit, consolidate, and start moving back up. And if it were to do that, then I would definitely be a buyer. I would look for it to break uh, this high for sure, which already would be worth it because that's a 40% move, and I could see it extend and test the Monero's all-time high, which I think somewhere around 516, um, which would be interesting. It would be interesting. So we'll keep an eye on Monero for that. I'm going to look at Litecoin next. Just keeping today's theme is going to be ancient coins, battle tested, at least protocol wise, those that hang around. We can see we just crossed the daily close. We're in the weekly time frame right now. On the daily, you can see there's a pretty bearish looking candle, big body, about the same, almost as big as the tail, um, and it's right at these range uh, these range lows from the most recent range. Um, this does look like an area where we might be finding support. It's going to be crucial for Litecoin to not break this and close below this. If it were to do that, I think you know we'll be looking probably more than likely at $81 as the next support level. Um, and who knows if this is also somewhat of a head and shoulders pattern playing out over here. The market tends to, you tend to see patterns repeat in the market because, especially if Bitcoin's doing something, because Bitcoin kind of calls the shots here. So we saw the breakdown of this most recent trend line for Litecoin on the daily. It has kept testing it, back testing it, and you know, basically losing. If it doesn't reclaim it soon and hold it, then I think it's going to start pulling away from this and head towards the downside. Today's probably, in my opinion, make or break day for Litecoin. So we'll keep an eye on that. I also like Litecoin on a higher time frame because, like the theme of ancient coins, um, it still, in my opinion, hasn't had the same move that we've seen from Stellar, Ripple, and most recently Monero. And that is the move, towards, I want to say 270 to, the all-time high at, what was it? Right around 400, 413. That's a pretty significant move from where it's at currently, which is right around 100. You're talking about 2 to 3x, um, potentially more. However, um, it also, you know, given that it has lagged, also just means that it hasn't been as strong. So if it's going to be weak in an overall weak market, um, I would be wary about it. Another thing, though, interestingly though, that supports this, Litecoin maybe its turn next, so to speak, is that it has been moving upwards. So as you can see, the most recent lows, each one was a higher low than the last. If we make a channel here, another one, I like the way it plays with the 75 and 25 percentile of the channel. Um, as you see, it has pretty much held the 25% and stuck, it has broken, flashed a bit above the 75th percentile, but has mainly just stuck here in near the middle. And this is trending upwards, right? It may be hard to see looking outwards, but technically speaking, we got higher lows here, we got higher highs. Um, and we have just, a tasty looking target here. So we'll keep an eye out Litecoin for the next, we'll keep an eye on it probably for the next few weeks, if not months. Um, in the short term, I would expect a bit more downside, like the rest of the market. Um, but it really needs to hold for it to have a better shot at getting that move like the other, relics. I think that is probably going to be it for the markets that we are going to analyze today. We'll be covering a wider breadth of the market, however, there is a lot of noise at the time being, from my perspective. The market's still in the process of washing out all of the, useless froth from the dead opportunistic projects of years past. There's obviously little question about Bitcoin's value and long-term prospects, but there is a ton of redundancy and inefficiency in the market. I think the next couple years we're going to see the rise of projects that will be mainstays. We probably already have and have yet to realize it, but stay tuned because this is an exciting industry. I'm definitely going to be covering it for a while. And well, just wanna yeah, if you're still watching, just want to say thank you. Um, and yeah, leave a comment if you want to see anything in particular, or if you have any thoughts or suggestions about what you want to see me cover or how you want to see me cover things in the future. Thank you.